Um, ooh, Saul is finding out some fascinating
From
things.
the Horite cast, what does that mean?
I just looked it up, I Googled it. Who was Abraham?
Never be even a second.
Right.
Spend a lot of time proving that you're a good second, we promise. That's really fascinating. And, I wonder, it's probably not, it probably doesn't line up chronologically, but if you think about, temple sites in Karnak in Egypt, raise your hand if you've ever been to those. Maybe it's like something about the Horus caste, a following of a particular Egyptian god. I think that might be a little bit later, but who knows if it's Joshua, the author of Joshua could be even later than that.
So, Rabbi, I'm conscious of the fact that we have so much to cover this 10.
Yeah.
We have Cantor Nimi here, and again, he is going to sing us in with one of his original compositions for Lechuna Ranina. He is either going to be singing us in or has shared with me some wonderful melodies for this week of studying the Psalms of the Kabbalat Shabbat service. Everybody can see this?
Yes, it's beautiful.
Okay.
All right, let's all mute ourselves so we can hear Cantor Nimi.
So I when I write tunes for this kind of liturgy, Kabbalat Shabbat, it's so much about approaching Shabbat with the fullness of our joy. And so if there's any time, any service, or any piece of text or liturgy that just deserves a fun tune, it's these kinds of texts. That, of course, honor the structure of the text, but that something that can just be upbeat and fun. So this was a tune that I wrote for the first 5 verses of Psalm 95 for Kabbalat Shabbat. Vizmirot narialo, lechuneranen al Adonai, naria letzur yishenu, nikad mafanav b'toda, vizmirot narialo. Ki el gadol Adonai, umelech gadol al kol Elohim, asher beyado mechkere aretz v'toachot tarim lo. Lechuneranen al Adonai, naria letzur yishenu, nikad mafanav b'toda, vizmirot narialo. Lechuneranen al Adonai, naria letzur yishenu, nikad mafanav b'toda, vizmirot narialo. Ki el gadol Adonai, umelech gadol al kol Elohim, asher biyado mechkere aretz v'toachot tarim lo. אשר לא היה והוא עשהו ויבשת ידיו יצרו לפונרנן על אדוני נריע לצור ישנו נקד מפניו בתודה בזמירות נריע לו לפונרנן על אדוני נריע לצור ישנו נקד מפניו בתודה Vizmirot narialo, nikad mafanav b'toda. Vizmirot narialo, nikad mafanav b'toda. Vizmirot narialo.
Wow. Several people in chat said they heard a little calypso there.
There's a time and a place.
Yeah. So before I turn it over to Rabbi Rapport, I hope we all brought our copies of Bechol Levavcha to class today. That will be our text for this week. I'm going to put a link in the chat to buy one. Everyone in this class has made enough of a commitment. They should have one of these books at home. If for any reason you don't have the resources right now to buy one on your own, contact us and we will work it out. We want everyone who's here right now to make sure they have their own copy. Can we see everybody who has their copy? Everybody hold it up? Wonderful. Okay, here is the link, and Rabbi, it is all yours.
Perfect. Well, I am so delighted to be back with the Psalms class. I've been looking forward to this week very, very much. Of course, for everyone's exquisite company, and especially because I love Kabbalat Shabbat. It's really, really exciting for me. I've been like waiting for the class to get to Psalms 90 XYZ, or at least Psalm 29. But we take our time. And this is a perfect opportunity to sort of do a break in the chronological ordering of the Psalms that you've been studying so closely, because as Annika pointed out in the chat, starting the first week of November, we have a whole new series of Hebrew classes at CBST. Hands up if you were part of a Hebrew class over the summer at what we have lovingly called CBSTU, that we started. We had 90 people enrolled in all of these varying levels of Hebrew. It was amazing. We are so excited. If anybody wants to put in the chat, I've been hearing testimonial upon testimonial about the change in the relationship that individuals are finding with the Hebrew language itself, especially with Psalm study, to be able to have that sort of intimacy with the language, and comfort and excitement to discover all of the things that you see in the original Hebrew. And then, of course, the relationship that changes when you're a participant in services, whether that's Shabbat or high holidays, when you're really like taking in the Hebrew and starting to recognize the beautiful patterns and meanings behind it. So this is just a very short plug, I promise. I also want to like take 2 minutes for questions about the Hebrew classes since we're all here right now. But we are offering a from scratch, never learned Aleph Bet or learned Aleph Bet and it was a while ago and maybe would like a refresher, a very beginner's class in Hebrew, just like we did over the summer. So that's for everybody who wants to start their Hebrew learning journey at every possible age. We have an Aleph 2, which we have I came to class to do a brief plug, but it was before the registration page was all finalized. So I want to make sure that I correct just a couple of things that I said, because thanks to our brilliant testers, Sharon Golub, Annika Cooper, and Harold Levine, we got a lot of very helpful feedback to make sure that like class times and class names and class descriptions matched up with what people expected. So Aleph is, let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. And Aleph 2 is if you were studying with Mia Rothstein over the summer in the Aleph class. You started over the summer. You are now about 50% of the way through the Hebrew alphabet and its associated vowels in the book Aleph Isn't Tough. You are in Aleph 2, which is meeting at the exact same days, at the exact same times as it was over the summer, using the exact same book. You'll start where you left off and finish out your study of Hebrew language and letters and vowels and all of the root words that you're learning. If you are starting in the fall, you weren't in our summer classes, and you think, I kind of know my Hebrew letters, but I could use a refresher on that. I don't need to start from 0, but maybe I could start from 1. This is a great class for you. And to help you figure out which class level in which you belong, we've provided a couple self-assessments. You know, nobody's grading them, nobody's judging them. We just put some resources up on the registration page you can download and say, oh, this looks a little too easy for me, maybe I'll level up, or say, this looks a little unknown. I'm gonna try exactly this level and see if this is a good fit for me. So start at the beginning, Aleph. Start just past the beginning, Aleph 2. We also have a Bet 2 class. If you were studying with Mia Rothstein over the summer in the book Aleph Isn't Tough, Aleph Isn't Enough. You know all your Hebrew letters and vowels, but you're really interested in building out your vocabulary, especially as it pertains to prayer book liturgy, which is what these books focus on because it's the most frequent use of Hebrew if you're a diaspora Jew and as part of a Jewish community. Again, you can start with this class even if you didn't take it over the summer. We've got a self-assessment for you to see, is this a comfy fit for me? Does this look a little too challenging, a little too easy? And you can stream right in. And then my class is for at least Bet 2 knowledge base. You should be able to read all of the Hebrew letters and vowels. Not so invested if you can like perfectly comprehend or translate them. If you can't, it's totally fine. But my class is not going to be pausing to say, and what is this Hebrew letter? And let's perfectly sound out this word together. My class is focusing on the application of Hebrew language in our liturgical texts using Siddur B'chol Levavcha as our textbook. And we're going to be going through the Friday night service, studying each prayer as a Hebrew text and talking about, what does the Hebrew reveal to us about the many meanings and connotations that we might apply to this particular prayer. How old is this Hebrew? Can we see that it's straight out of the Torah Hebrew, that it's gone through some evolutions, and how do we notice that from Mishnaic Hebrew to Rabbinic Hebrew to medieval Hebrew to modern Hebrew? This Siddur is one of my favorite works of art because it includes so many beautiful texts from all around the Jewish world, utilizing Hebrew in so many different ways as prayers, as poetry. So we will be studying some contemporary Hebrew texts as well, and sort of comparing, contrasting, and seeing this all as part of the Lashon Kodesh, the holy tongue, the holy language of Hebrew, and how we use it as a Jewish community, and especially how we use it as a Jewish community at CBST, a place that has literally innovated LGBTQ liturgy for Shabbat, for Jewish holidays, and for a language of prayer altogether. So we've got start at the beginning with Aleph, start just past the beginning with Aleph 2, start in the intermediate level with Bet 2, or study prayer book Hebrew very specifically in our own prayer book. Got to be able to read and sound out every word pretty comfortably, but you don't need to know necessarily what every word means, with Lashon Kodesh, the class that I'm teaching. And this next week of study is going to be sort of a little taste of what that class is going to be like. But I'm going to spiral upwards. I'm going to spiral downwards. This is an incredibly knowledgeable group of people. So we'll be taking some beautiful tangential directions from these core psalms of the Kabbalat Shabbat liturgy. We're going to take 2 minutes to answer any questions that anybody has about our Hebrew classes for the fall. They are running 8 weeks. We're not saying 8 weeks consecutively, because if you're taking a class on Thursday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all of those things are happening on Thursday. So we have sort of adjusted the schedule a little bit. But questions about where's my level, what's the book, who's the teacher, when's it meeting,
Okay,
potpourri.
Rabbi, I have a question. I went to the website and I don't see the registration live yet under Lair House, but I did just send a copy of your email to the entire class. So the entire class will have it in their email.
A copy, we sent a private invitation, an early registration link, to hopefully everybody in Psalms, everybody who took a Hebrew class over the summer, anybody who's taken a Lair House class recently. And you can just put if you don't mind, Harold, while I answer some more questions, do you want to take the link from that letter and put it in the chat?
Got it.
Registration is 100% live. We're taking registrations, maybe even at the moment. And another important thing to say is there is no set tuition for any of these classes. As we did over the summer, this is a moment where the world's turning inside out, and what you want to do is Jewish learning. Gegazont, like go with God. We want to support you in your studies. Whatever you feel is a worthy contribution at the level at which you're comfortable, we are appreciative. We're mostly just appreciative of your dedication and your learning. So there is no set tuition level. It's pay as you wish. All right.
Ira has had his hand up. Let's do hands and participants. Ira has his hand up.
Perfect.
Yes, good morning. Rabbi Rapport, I have a question about your class.
Yes.
Because on the registration page, the blurb said the self-assessment should be the Aleph Beit.
No, Beit 2.
But the Beit 2 self-assessment, is that right?
So
Because
if you can comfortably sound out all of the words on the Bet 2 assessment, then you're in great shape.
Okay,
You need to have completed what I would describe as Aleph 2. You need to have gotten all the way through the Aleph isn't textbook or some equivalent, which means that you know all your Hebrew letters, all your vowels, and you sound out words comfortably. Okay. The more you know, the better. Okay, but that would be the floor, and the ceiling is limitless.
I registered this morning.
Lori Troutman.
Would it be not wise? I'm an Aleph 2, and I know a bunch of us are asking this question. Your course sounds so interesting, dealing with the prayer book. So would it be possible to do both of them? Some of us can read most of the letters anyway.
You are welcome to give it a try. But what we wanted to be able to do is offer a spectrum and offer a more challenging class that works upon Hebrew skills already built. So I would describe that kind of as auditing, even though like everybody's
Right.
auditing, there are no grades.
Right.
There might be some things which are above your level. And what I ask really lovingly is that you not return to Mia Rothstein's class and said, Rabbi Rapport taught us this grammatical concept. Can we go over it together? Because we're trying to make sure that everybody is fluid and competent and confident in the reading of Hebrew in that class. But if you want to be part of it, listen, learn, let it wash over you, I'm delighted. I'm also just not going to, in what we're going to do in this next week as part of our Kabbalat Shabbat Psalms, we're going to stop. We're going to really look at the roots of these Hebrew words. We're going to take time with it. And when you're in my class for the entire semester, we're going to spend less time on that because we want to look at the beautiful intricacies that your past Hebrew learning will have set you up well to do. Does that make sense? So everybody's welcome. You can try out a session, see how it goes, but know that this class is going to be at an intermediate advanced level, which I think is magnificent. It's a good challenge and opportunity, but don't stress out.
Rabbi, I'm conscious that it is 10:15.
It is
If
indeed.
people have individual questions, should they contact Jesse? Should they contact you? Who should they write to?
So if it's about your Hebrew level, feel free to contact me, and some of you already have. If it's about a literal registration issue, contact Jesse because he's the maestro behind the website.
Great. And I will also say in terms of education that Rabbi Moskowitz started his wonderful 15 minutes mornings with Mike Moskowitz series on Facebook Live at 8:30. A number of us were there, and that will continue Sunday through Friday, open-ended, he said, until Pesach at least.
Yeah.
So with that, tell us about the Psalms of the Friday evening service.
Boy. So the other thing I wanted to say is I wanted to thank Cantor Nimi for singing us in and out, not only today, but all the days of the week, because there are so many beautiful musical compositions for the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat. Cantor Nimi can absolutely correct me, but it is my impression that of all the pieces of Hebrew liturgy, the Kabbalat Shabbat as a whole is the one that seems to have the most musical compositions written for it. I think there are probably like 1,000 Lachadodis floating out in the universe. And these psalms are just so beautiful and joyful that musicians throughout time and across the Jewish world are constantly inspired to create these gorgeous compositions. On Thursday, we are going to spend some time looking particularly at the music of Kabbalat Shabbat with a special session that Cantor Nimi will be leading, which excites me incredibly because I want to learn from him. So we will have plenty of questions about music. We're not going to focus on them so much this Monday through Wednesday. We're going to hold them until Thursday, but every day Cantor Nimi will be introducing us to some beautiful tunes that will whet our appetite for that special session. So today, if you have your Siddur, you get sort of an extra bonus because we're looking at things that are specifically in the book. For the rest of the week, we're going to be providing a PDF of the Siddur, the same one that we use every Friday night. We put it in the Facebook caption and say, here you go. If you don't have a Siddur, we want to make sure you can follow along as we look at the particular psalms that make up Kabbalat Shabbat. But today, if you have the book, and this is also kind of a plug for the book, we're going to do things that are specific and special that don't show up in the PDF. So for instance, can I see, is there anybody in the class who was part of the creation of our Siddur at CBST? Sarah Sloan was. I know that Marcia Melnick and Susan Meyer were. Ruth and Harriet were. This was absolutely a community labor of love, and it took a while. It went through several iterations. And what emerges is just so profoundly gorgeous, down to like all of the tiny, tiny details that make up this book. So if you're literally holding the Siddur, what I want you to do is open the cover and don't even turn the page. Just the inside cover of the Siddur. And for some of my, I'd call them, this is without vowels, but these words should be fairly familiar to you. Don't read them off my Zoom screen because they're backwards. But if you're looking within the book, it says, Tov lehodot l'Adonai. Is this ringing any bells? Where have you seen or heard these words before?
I'll answer for the group and say the Psalm for Shabbat.
Exactly. Psalm 92, Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbat. This is a psalm for the day of Shabbat. Oh, apparently it was showing not backwards in people's Zoom windows. It's very impressive.
It's also on where we keep the Torahs.
Exactly, Devora, you nailed it. So at CBST, and I wish I had the picture just to fling up. It's around, and maybe I'll bring it tomorrow. Now that I think about it, our Aron Kodesh, the Ark where we hold our Torah scrolls, it has those words emblazoned on it. For those of you who grew up in many different Jewish synagogues, think of the phrase that was important enough to your community that it was put on or above the Ark where the Torahs are kept. This is kind of like the mission statement of a Jewish community, the place where you would put it. And CBST's is Tov Lehodot Ladonai from Psalm 92. It's also, if you ever opened the door at 30th Street, or if you ever opened the door to the sanctuary, we have these beautiful door handles that are engraved with Hebrew letters on them, the same, Tov Lehodot Ladonai, so that when you grasp it and pull or turn down, it's literally written on your hand.
Here we
Thank
are.
you, Carol, there it is. So you can see in this image of somebody grasping the door handle, all those tiny Hebrew letters, it says Tov Lehodot Ladonai. And there is our Ark in the Wine family sanctuary. And you can see you can see a little bit of the Tov, but you can definitely see Lehodot Ladonai. It is good to give thanks to God. And this is the thing that CBST holds so close, that is repeated over and over again. And I think all of Rabbi Kleinbaum's favorite aphorisms that show up over and over again thematically in her writing and in her speaking. Joy is an act of resistance. Not everybody can't do everything, but every person can do something. It all kind of stems back to this phrase: it is good to give thanks to Adonai. Our study this week is going to culminate with a very close reading of that particular psalm, of Psalm 92, because it is the psalm for Shabbat. But to begin, I want to start even before the beginning. If you have your prayer book, I want you to open it up to the table of contents. So this is, everybody can see this? Excellent. So literally this is page, what is it, 2? Yeah, we got some introductory material at the very beginning.
Page
It's
8.
8. This is page 8 in your Siddur. This is not in the Siddur PDF that we share with people, but following today, everything that we study will be in the PDF. And I just want to take a little time for like the foundation. Where does Kabbalat Shabbat happen? What is Kabbalat Shabbat? How did it come about? And how did it come to include these psalms? So in CBST Siddur, we have these beautiful introductory material, Chomer Lidrosh, like material for further study and storytelling. Why pray at all? Why pray with CBST? And then we have a series of prayers that are often done at home. So in traditional Judaism, candle lighting would happen in the home. It's not necessarily.
Rabbi, I think you need to unshare and share again, because we're looking at page 9 instead of page 8 on your screen.
Okay, let's do this again. Apologies, friends. We're going to need that page pretty soon. Here we go. Are you seeing
Yes,
introduction?
yes,
Why
that's
pray?
it. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. Really appreciate it. All right. So this is what I was talking about, these opening prayers and meditations. Historically, were done in the home and not in the synagogue community. But, once it became more commonplace for synagogues to be the place for people to gather and celebrate all together, it came to include this opening material, the candle lighting especially, the songs that one sings that aren't necessarily halakha, like you must do them, but they're minhag hamakom. Every place in the Jewish world has some different songs that they sing around the candles. Shalom Aleichem is sort of the Ashkenazi Jews who descend from Germany and also Eastern Europe and some of Western Europe more generally, welcoming Sabbath angels. But the very first thing that you would do all together in community is Kabbalat Shabbat. So if you look at literally the Hebrew words, Kabbalat Shabbat, all pretty familiar with this phrase Shabbat, right? And if we're extremely technical about it, it's not the name of a holiday. It's a verb, it's a noun. It means to rest. So what is this Kabbalat? The root is Kuf Bet Lamed, and it means to receive. If the word Kabbalah, which many people are familiar with as the mystical, esoteric study tradition of Jewish history and of Jewish faith, means that like you're receiving hidden knowledge. So we receive Shabbat all together with this series of Psalms, Psalm 95 through 99, which is the Ashkenazi tradition. I'm doing more study into this. This is very new to me, but across the Jewish world, we know that Judaism is not a monolith, that there are many, many, many shared practices because they stem from the same sacred text. But Jewish communities around the world evolve really beautifully in all of these different directions. So to say Kabbalat Shabbat is not such a simple statement. There are Sephardi communities that start with Psalm 29. There are Mizrahi communities, like the Yemenite community does Psalm 29, and then totally separate piyutim, liturgical poems, entering into Kabbalat Shabbat. But at CBST, we're following this Ashkenazi tradition that is pretty widespread, that you have a series of Psalms, 95 through 99, Psalm 29, L'chadodi, and then Psalm 92. We sometimes do Psalm 93, not as common currently if you're attending CBST Friday night services. So what do you notice about the way this is laid out? How many Psalms are there before you get to the thing that's not a psalm, which is either Ana B'Choach, not as commonly sung at CBST as part of Kabbalat Shabbat, but you see it across the Jewish world, a lovely liturgical poem, and L'chadodi, this beautiful Kabbalistic poem written by Shlomo Alkabetz. What do you notice about how many psalms there are?
Sarah Siegel was quick on the buzzer. 6, she says.
Exactly. So there are 6. You get a little break here for like some lovely poetry that's not dedicatedly from the book of Psalms. And then you jump to Psalm 92, making a total of the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat to be 7. Why, friends? Why is this such a beautiful, auspicious, and symbolic number for our receiving of Shabbat?
Sarah Sloan has her hand up. She knows the answer.
Yes, please, Sarah.
Sarah, unmute yourself.
I just did. There are 7 days of creation.
Exactly. So we couldn't have picked a better week to be studying this in particular. We just finished reading in our Torah portion the very first chapter of Bereshit, the creation story. And there's a lot of beautiful clues hidden in that Torah portion that have been interpreted to explain why Jewish practice is the way that it is. So for instance, when does a Jewish day begin? What natural celestial event signifies the move from one day to the next?
Saul Zalkin.
The day begins in the evening.
The day begins in the evening, which to our, American secular ears is really just bizarre. The day begins in the evening. Why is this? It actually is linked directly back to this past week's Torah portion.
Well, both Saul and I chanted this portion.
Yes.
And it says, Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Voker, Yom, fill in the blank.
Yep.
So there was evening, and then there was morning, and that was the day.
Exactly, and that is the pattern that is repeated consistently. You can look at the at Genesis 1:1 through the very beginning of chapter 2 as a creation story that's really beautiful and poetic. Like it uses all of these poetic devices, including parallelism and repetition of language. And every single day, it's Vayehi Erev, there was evening, Vayehi Voker, there was morning, day 1. It doesn't say there was morning. There was evening, day 1. And therefore, Judaism interprets this to say that the day begins at the evening with the setting of the sun. This is why we place this particular service rubric at the very beginning. The sunset is starting to pinken the sky. It's not quite Shabbat yet. We've brought it in with the lighting of candles. So we've officially created for ourselves a boundary. We've done a mitzvah that is supposed to be the last fire that we lit, the last work that we did from the week that was, and we're moving into this beautiful limbo space, liminal space, doorway space between the week that was and the week that is yet to be, a day of rest. Because as Sarah said, you've got these days of creation. And as Harold was quoting, Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Voker, Yom Echad, Yom Sheni. On each of these days, God creates something. And God says it was good. Every single thing God has created and God sees, it was good. I could probably ask Harold or Saul or a lot of us to be able to chant from memory that particular parsha. And this was a pattern that is repeated. God creates light and calls it good. So God separates day from night. And it was good. Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Voker, Yom Echad. But when you get to the seventh day, something extra special happens. What is unique about the seventh day? Yes, please.
Saul? It is not just Tov, it is Tov.
So it's Vayichulu Hashemayim, the seventh day, not the sixth day.
Yes.
Seventh day is Vayichulu Hashemayim. God rested on the seventh day.
Yep. Vayivarach Elohim et Yom HaShavi'i Vayikadesh Oto. God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, made it separate, made it holy. The root Kodesh, which is our word for holiness, literally means like sacred as in separated out. It's different. And it's so good and so beautiful because God does what? What does God create on Shabbat? Rest. God creates nothing besides the idea of resting and not being in like active creation mode all the time. And this is extraordinary. This idea that not only that rest is sacred and so important, but that there should be some kind of delineation, some kind of separation so that time doesn't just constantly blur together, which is a feeling I'm sure many of us can associate with right now, but that there's a marker. We move from one week to the next, and we don't just do it automatically. We stop, we rest. And in this way, we perform God's same sacred action. And in the Torah, there are few to none more important mitzvot than the keeping and the protecting and the remembering of Shabbat. So much so that if you break Shabbat by doing work or any number of other forbidden activities, the Talmudic rabbis say that there are about 40 categories that you shouldn't trespass. The pain is death, and it is very painful. That's how important Shabbat and how important the idea of rest and stopping, taking a pause before you jump into the next thing is in Judaism. I'm going to jump into the Psalms next, but I see at least a hand up. And Harold, are there any other questions in the chat?
Oh, Sarah Siegel had her hand up. Sarah?
Yeah, I was just wondering, do any of you remember Rabbi Kleinbaum's drash and what the term was? It wasn't Benoni or anything. It like the in-between time.
Mm-hmm. Bein Hashmashot, maybe?
Yes, I heard Shmashot and I looked up Shmashot and it was like, use, and I'm like, that's not it. It was the Bain part I was missing.
Yeah. So that means like the twilight hour.
Yeah.
And it's not just an hour, it's sort of translated, and of course our fluent Hebrew speakers can bring in some of the more thoughtful connotation on this phrase. You can put it into the chat. But Sarah, what we're talking about is Bein Hashmashot.
Thank you.
Jeffrey Weiss.
Between the suns.
I have two questions. One of them, I don't know if it's appropriate for now, but I'll ask the question that I think is more appropriate now, is that you were saying 6 Psalms, but I'm counting 8 Psalms in the index.
Yes. Okay. So when the way I'm counting them, And, you know, like the Jewish math, it's an art form. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at Psalm 29, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we take a break for
Mhm.
some beautiful medieval poetic material.
Yes.
And then Psalm 92 is
Mhm.
the 7th. That's really the 7th. And that's also one of the reasons why CBST doesn't do Psalm 93 so often. But when we look at these Psalms in particular, and we look at their language and we look at their imagery and symbolism, you'll see why Psalm 93 fits really nicely into this kind of rubric. But if you're doing the formal counting,
Yeah.
6 days of creation up to Psalm 29,
Mhm.
and then the 7th after a little break
Okay.
is Psalm 92. Make sense
Okay,
now?
thank you. Yeah. The other question I had, I don't know if it will be maybe later, but when did the term Kabbalah, Kabbalah Shabbat came into being? Because when I was growing up,
Yes, we
it was
will
just
talk about that.
Friday night services.
Yeah, why not? And that's literally the next thing we're going to look at. Good
Right.
segue, Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank
Remind
you.
me, unless we get off on another tangent.
Sherry Dratfield.
So I've known for a while that the penalty shown for not observing the Sabbath was death.
Mhm.
When was that carried out? I mean, I haven't seen bloodbaths of people, you know, going after people who are, you know, not
So,
observing Sabbath.
You do see this repeated over and over again in our halachic Torah portions, the ones that have lots of laws instead of narratives. There aren't so many narratives of people being put to death, so hopefully it's like a thing that we said that nobody ever did. Or you found like ways to say like, oh, they didn't know it was Shabbos, they didn't like the sunset over there, it was behind a tree. But we do say it enough that we really mean it.
Linda Solomon.
That wasn't an answer.
2 questions now based on the last one. But the first question I had was the 18 minutes that comes after sunset. Is that the separation that we consider to then, that after that 18 minutes, then it's actually the next day?
It's not necessarily the next day, but it is Shabbos, and we like having a little buffer because, you know, bringing it down to the minute, down to the second, and also when you think about what an ancient custom this is, and the ancient methods of telling time that were in place at that point. So not so surprising that you're using this natural event like a sunset that kind of everybody can agree on. But as time gets more and more finite, as technology gets better and better to count it, then you start getting, well, sunset's a while. Where exactly is the buffer zone that we can depend on? Any other questions about the Psalms? Because that's where I want to head to. So if I could lovingly ask other questions about Jewish practice to get put into the chat, but people who have Psalms questions, keep your hands up.
I'm gonna put that. Shep had his hand up, and then let's move into some Psalms. Shep, about the Psalms.
Well, I guess it's not, but
okay, let's let Rabbi.
Okay, forget it.
Let's let the Rabbi go on.
A little bit later, put it in the chat so you don't forget it. But we want this is the Psalms class, new. So we're going to study some Psalms. Really quick, the other thing that I want to show you is the other page that we were accidentally looking at. So everybody's seeing Mariv, the evening service. Yes. This connects to the idea that the day starts in the evening. So the Shabbat service is an evening service. And in the Jewish liturgical structure, the bone structure basically is always pretty much the same. We have the Shema and its blessings, which have the blessings before, like the Baruch Hu, the call to prayer, and the blessings that come after, like Mi Chamocha. And then you've got the Amidah, which on the weekday are 18 blessings that are recited, but on Shabbos, we're all resting, especially God. You don't want to bother God with like your 18 million requests that you have of God. So the Shabbat Amidah is abbreviated only to be those praises and expressions of gratitude. Again, Tov Lehodot Ladonai, that's the perfect thing to do on Shabbat, is to thank God for all the blessings that you have received. This is your regular, average evening service. What makes Shabbat special? And this goes back to Jeffrey's question about how do we get Kabbalat Shabbat? Why do we need this whole like reception ceremony, especially for Shabbat? It's There's only one other Mariv service on the entire Jewish calendar that has any introductory material whatsoever. Jewish holidays abound, but only one other thing besides Shabbat gets a special introductory service before you dive into Mariv. If anybody knows, it is kind of an esoteric $1,000,000 question. I saw Cantor Nimi being like, yes, no, I'm a Cantor.
Is that Kol Nidre by any
It is in fact Kol Nidre. That is the only other time of the year when we preface our Mariv service with anything. Otherwise, we dive straight in, and then all of the important part happens as a part of the Mariv service or as a part of the Shacharit, the morning service, like Torah reading. But Kabbalat Shabbat was so extraordinary that the preparations need to start before the Mariv service begins. So when did this become a thing? Jeffrey and all of us want to know. The very first reference that we have to Kabbalat Shabbat is this mention in the Talmud that two of the great sages would dress themselves in their finery to receive Shabbat, and they would welcome it with words of song. And so one particular sage, Yana, used to say, you know, come, O bride, and that is the original inspiration for Lecha Dodi, which we're not going to talk about as much, but is really beautiful and important. And then the other would just, he'd put on his most beautiful clothes, his finery, and he would go out to greet Shabbat. And when you think of all of these traditional Torah stories of welcoming, one of the things that's so extraordinary about the way that Abraham encounters these angels, which are the bringers of the blessing of, you know, you will be a great nation, Isaac's birth. Abraham goes out to meet them. It's not that Abraham's just like sitting in the doorway of the tent or, you know, the other dwelling structure that Abraham lived in. Abraham saw the angels from afar and went out to greet them. And so too, with that same level of enthusiasm, do we go out to greet Shabbat? We don't wait for it to come to us. We are so excited for its presence that we run straight towards it. It wasn't until the medieval period, Svat, Isaac Luria, as we were talking about in our pre-class time, the Kabbalists, who were very much on this like reception wavelength. Remember, Kabbal, Kuf Bet Lamed is the root for receiving and for welcoming. And the Kabbalists were the ones who started to create these beautiful and ornate customs about how do you welcome Shabbat? How do you make like a protocol of hospitality for this most precious guest? And it's Isaac Luria and his cohort of, you know, roughly 16th century, some before, some after, who are in the northern Israel, currently in the state of Israel. The city of Sfat is up in the north. Sfat was ruled by many different regimes throughout time after the expulsion from Israel. And so this city is filled with people who are mystics, and it is a destination and a crucible for all kinds of beautiful Jewish ideas. The custom became that you would dress in white. Hands can wave if you ever went to a Jewish camp where that was the custom, that on Fridays you wore white, whether it was a Jewish camp or whether it was just a camp where there were a lot of Jews, and like magically on Friday you all start wearing white. Because this mimics wearing a kittel, the garment that we also wear on Yom Kippur, which is what a groom wears under the chuppah. There is this whole beautiful built out concept of Shabbat as a bride that we're receiving. If we can imagine, like, who is the character that gets the most like, and everybody stands up to greet, it's a bride who comes into a room. And there is some lovely, lovely interpretation that says that God is the groom in this heteronormative patriarchal expectation of a couple who's standing under the chuppah waiting for Shabbat, the bride, to enter. And sometimes Shabbat and the children of Israel can get kind of morphed together because we're carrying out this same custom. These psalms were the ones that eventually became the commonplace custom to be recited as we're preparing ourselves for Shabbat to arrive. this lovely, lovely, perfect symbolism of 6 Psalms of introduction, Psalms 95 through 99, which all share similar themes. We're going to be looking very, very closely at the words of these Psalms, but I'll sort of spoil the ending for you that all of them are very much based around creation and the imagery of the natural world, mimicking the story that we see in Genesis about the creation of the natural world. All this lead up to Shabbat. So we have these Psalms that are incredibly celebratory in nature. I'm going to be honest, the Psalms that this class has been currently studying wouldn't necessarily call like the most celebratory of all 150 Psalms in the corpus. That's why we love the book of Psalms. It's got such emotional range, a spectrum of the way that the psalmist speaks about the world, speaks to God, speaks about God's role in the world. The Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat are all unified in their voice. They glorify God. We are grateful to God. We are surrounded by blessings. We are surrounded by miracles, not merely like the tiny miracles that we remember to appreciate. Like the sun goes down each day. That's a miracle. And it is good for us to be reminded of sometimes the even regular expected natures of miracles, because what if the sun didn't go down each day? But when we look at these Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat, we'll see like truly miraculous things, that like mountains grow and waves crash, and God's voice is so powerful that the entire world is whipped into a frenzy of ecstatic celebration. These Psalms are so beautiful because the voice is extraordinary and awesome, literally like awe-filled. And we see this relationship with God as creator. I love to think of it as God as artist. And we are like the subjects of the painting, and also appreciating the painting, and also within the painting. And these are all Psalms that are just so overwhelmingly overbrimming with joy. And that's the feeling that we want to capture as Shabbat arrives. It comes to its peak with Lecha Dodi, which is from this same era of writing. It's a lovely, in Hebrew it's called a piyut, a liturgical poem that repeats its chorus every time. Lecha Dodi likrat kala panei Shabbat nekabela, that come, let us go celebrate the bride, or let us celebrate this like sacred reception of Shabbat. And then we take a breath and we say, Tov lahodot l'Adonai. The specific psalm for Shabbat, the psalm that is reserved for the 7th day of creation, is the one that gives such gratitude. And Psalm 92 still fits beautifully into this rubric of those other 95 through 99, to say that like God is a magnificent artist and creator, and we are so appreciative and also awestruck by God's work. It's got all of these lovely natural elements and imagery that is repeated. When we read Psalm 93, it's also about like the voices of the waters raging. It's so lovely. I don't really know what happened to Psalm 94, but I can't wait to study it with you when you get into the 90s and you're going through one by one. 94 really didn't make the cut when it came to like which are the 6 and then which is the 1. But this is the way that we welcome in Shabbat every single week. And these are the words which, you know, so perfectly syncopated and sometimes rhyming and sometimes consonants and assonants, and just so exciting in their language that they have inspired endless generations of musicians to come up with even more settings for their words.
Rabbi, I'm so sorry. We're past we're at time for our sing out.
Yeah.
As much as we would love to keep on going. So can we wrap up the teaching for the day and go back to sing it, put it back to Cantor Nimi? Is that all right?
Yes, it certainly is. So this was all just to get us so excited about Kabbalat Shabbat, to get us in the same, you know, thrilled and frenzied state to welcome the study of these Psalms. Remember that tomorrow and Wednesday, we're going to be studying the Psalms carefully, especially with the beautiful translation that Yehuda Berger provided for these Psalms in our CBST Siddur. But if you want to keep your translations handy, you know, your Fisher, your Alter, it's only going to help. And then Thursday, Cantor Nimi will be leading us in a special session on the music of Kabbalat Shabbat. So please take it away, Cantor Nimi.
Or also, incidentally, I just struck in my mind these first couple of verses of Psalm 95. They actually also exist in another place in Jewish liturgy, in Slichot liturgy, with profoundly different music. So maybe at some point I'll give you all a sample of what that sounds like. Maybe on Thursday. So, but for now though, something that captures the joy, that joy of Kabbalat Shabbat. Ranen al Adonai, Nariel etzur ishenu, Nekad mafana b'todah, V'izmiron Narielo. Ranen al Adonai, Nariel etzur ishenu, Nekad mafana b'todah, V'izmiron Narielo. Ki el gadol Adonai, Umelech gadol al kol Elohim. אשר בידו מחקרי ארץ ותופות תרים לו אשר לא הים והוא עשהו ויבשת ידיו יצרו ונרנן על אדוני נריע לצור אישנו כנף ענף בתורה בזמירות נריע לו נרנן על אדוני, נריע לצור אישנו, מכנף ענף בתודה, בזמירות נריע לו. מכנף ענף בתודה, בזמירות נריע לו. מכנף ענף בתודה, בזמירות נריע לו.
Whoa. Thank you so much, Cantor.
Amazing.
All right.
And we get to hear more of Cantor Nimi's original compositions, as well as I'm sure some of the absolute favorites of everybody in this class. If you've got favorite settings to Kabbalat Shabbat Psalms, maybe put up some YouTube links in our
Facebook.
Group.
Yep.
Cantor Nimi's got a list. Believe me, Cantor Nimi has a list, which I'm so excited about because I like his taste. And this is the way that we're going to celebrate all week long until Shabbat arrives.
Great. Bye-bye. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, everybody. And
Thank
write to me if you've got any Hebrew class questions.
Great class.
Thanks. They're all great, right? That's what Shep says.
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
I think it's just difficult for all of us to keep our excitement under control when we get to like, yes, our favorite song.
I love it.
Just wait till we get to 150. Oh my goodness.
I mean, I think it's, unless we do a special segment on Psukei de Zimra.
Which I'm hoping that we do, Cantor Nimi, because you're right. Kabbalat Shabbat is not the only time that we've got this special devoted rubric to Psalms in our liturgy. I plan to come back for that one.
Yeah, but otherwise it's going to take us quite a while to get to 150.
It's good to have goals.
I don't want it to end.
So positive.
But once it
well,
ends, we could do the Jewish way and start over again.
Exactly. That's what's great about the Book of Psalms, and so Simchat Torah perfect. So Beit Simchat Torah perfect, Linda. Thank you.
So, I mean, at this rate, it's going to take us 20 years to get to 150.
Oh, good. I look forward to hanging out with you every morning until then.
Hi, this is Catherine, and I'm exploring Judaism right now. My mom was Jewish, but she didn't practice it, and I was raised as a Christian. And I'm finding this so fascinating. I'm just starting to understand the service on a Friday night and the significance of the Psalms. And it's just so interesting now. It's opening a door for me into the service and into the practice of Judaism. I'm just going to start crying. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And
Catherine, I know you a very long time. I never knew that. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you.
This class is really beautiful.
My life was an empty slate until I came to CBST. Everything I know about being a Jew, I learned there. So welcome to our culture.
Thank you, Deborah.
Some people were asking, any chance that we could buy the Siddur and have it appear before class tomorrow? Nope. But you should buy the Siddur. We'll put the link into the chat. It's on our website. We have our whole like sisterhood inclusive gift shop. And we're going to share a PDF tomorrow of the Siddur, so everybody can follow along in the PDF. It's just the PDF that we put out to the public doesn't include the table of contents, and I felt like that was a really nice introductory tool so you can see the layout. I'm a very visual learner. I like to see how it's all like spaced out together. All right, dear friends, see you tomorrow morning. Same time, same place.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Vote early, vote often.
Yes, please.
Did Barbara leave? I guess Barbara left. Everybody have a great day. I got to go to work.
You too. Bye.
Shep, call me and let me know what happened at the doctor. He's gone too. Okay. Going to work. I'm an old lady to go to work, but I'm going to work.
Hi, I'm going to shut down the room right now, Sherry and Laurie. Is that all right? Your mic's off, Sherry. Your mic's off, Sherry. Lori, is it okay if I shut down the room? Just wave. Wave if yeah, it's okay for me to shut down the room. Just wave to me if I could shut down the room. Thank you, Lori. Sherry, let me unmute you, Sherry. Try to unmute you. I see your lips moving. I don't see anything else. Hear anything else? I'm going to shut down the room. Say goodbye. Bye.